The moment I heard the front door of my ranch house splinter and crash open, I knew something was terribly wrong. I grabbed my shotgun from behind the door, only to be met with a mob of HOA board members storming into my living room like a SWAT team. And at the front of it all was Rick Miller, the self-proclaimed HOA president, waving a bright red piece of paper in his hand and barking orders like he was some kind of war general. "By order of the Green Valley Ranch HOA," Rick shouted, "all privately owned firearms are now banned. This is a mandatory gun seizure for the safety of the community." I stood there, frozen in disbelief. Was this a bad dream? I lived on a ranch, a private 30-acre property passed down from my grandfather. I wasn't even part of the HOA. Or so I thought. Before I could even open my mouth to argue, two board members yanked the shotgun right out of my hands. Another one pushed past me into the hallway, where my gun cabinet stood proudly, keys still hanging from the lock. I lunged forward, shouting, "You can't do this. This is theft. This is illegal." Rick smirked and said, "Inside the HOA, your so-called Second Amendment rights don't mean squat. Read the new bylaw we voted, you lost." I couldn't believe it. They were raiding my home like I was some kind of criminal. And worse, they were actually stealing my guns. Before I could stop them, they had emptied my entire gun cabinet. My late father's deer rifle, my prized collection of vintage handguns, even my old Civil War replica musket that had never fired a bullet. They piled them into the back of a beat-up HOA maintenance van parked outside. Neighbors stood on the gravel driveway watching. Some looked horrified. Some just shook their heads like this was no big deal. And me? I stood there in a cloud of dust as the van drove away with everything I owned to protect my home. Rick grinned like he had just won the lottery. "Better get used to it," he sneered. "You're living under my rules now." And then he was gone, leaving me staring at the empty gun cabinet, fists clenched so tight they turned white, my heart hammering in my chest. What I didn't know then was that this was just the beginning. What Rick had done wasn't just illegal. It was personal. He had a plan for my ranch, a plan that would turn my entire life upside down. But before I could even think about fighting back, I had to figure out how in the world the HOA claimed control over my ranch in the first place. It all started about 6 months ago, right after I inherited the property from my late grandfather, Thomas Walker. Grandpa Tom had owned the land since the 1950s. Back then it was nothing but rolling hills and open fields. When he bought it, there wasn't a single house for miles, just ranchers, farmers, and hardworking families living off the land. But times had changed. Suburban sprawl had crept in like a slow-moving flood. Now, less than half a mile down the dirt road, a shiny new subdivision called Green Valley Ranch Estates had sprung up. Cookie-cutter homes with white picket fences, perfectly trimmed lawns, and neighbors who peeked through their windows every time you sneezed. At first, I didn't pay them any mind. My ranch was fenced off. I had a private well, my own driveway, and more acres than I knew what to do with. I figured as long as I kept to myself, the HOA nonsense wouldn't touch me. I was wrong. One afternoon, a fancy letter showed up in my mailbox, gold embossed, like it was some kind of wedding invitation. It was from Green Valley Ranch Estates HOA. It claimed that under a recently expanded community covenant, my land, yes, my private land, was now officially part of the HOA. They said that because my grandfather had signed a vague community cooperation agreement decades ago, and because the county had rezoned part of the land to residential expansion, my ranch was now under their jurisdiction. I crumpled the letter and tossed it in the trash. No way was I going to pay monthly dues to some nosy group who wanted to tell me what color to paint my barn. But ignoring them didn't make them go away. Over the next few months, the HOA started making my life miserable. They fined me for unauthorized livestock, and meaning my cattle. They fined me for unsightly landscaping, meaning my fields. They even tried to fine me for having dangerous wildlife, because a family of deer liked to roam through my back pasture at sunset. I laughed it off at first. I thought it was just empty threats. But then things got serious. First, they sent a man named Carl, the HOA compliance officer, to take photos of my property. Carl was a skinny guy with a clipboard who drove a golf cart like he was on a SWAT mission. I caught him snapping pictures near my barn one afternoon. "Hey, get off my land," I yelled, storming toward him. Carl jumped, nearly dropping his clipboard. "You're in violation," he squeaked, before zooming off down my driveway like a scared rabbit. Next, they started mailing me fake violation notices every week. It was like a slow drip of harassment. I started keeping a file of them just in case I ever needed a lawyer. But nothing compared to what happened when Rick Miller became HOA president. Rick was a retired lawyer with too much free time and a thirst for power. He had moved into Green Valley Ranch Estates 2 years ago and immediately ran for president. His big promise? Safety and security for all residents, which apparently meant banning every gun in sight. According to Rick, firearms were threats to public peace and promoted violence. So, he pushed for a new bylaw that forbade all firearm ownership within HOA territory, even on private property. It passed. Barely. That's when he decided to make an example out of me. The day they raided my ranch, Rick posted it all over the neighborhood Facebook page. Pictures of the seized guns. Boasts about how the HOA was making the community safer. My blood boiled. I sat on the porch that evening, staring out across the empty fields, the same fields my grandfather had worked with his bare hands. I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let Rick get away with this. Not just because he had stolen from me, not just because he was trampling on my rights, but because deep down, I knew that if I didn't fight back, it wouldn't stop with me. It would be my neighbors next, my friends, maybe even the whole town. Still, I had to be smart about it. Rick was cunning. He had the HOA board eating out of his hand. If I charged in guns blazing, pun intended, they'd just paint me as the crazy cowboy who couldn't follow the rules. No. If I was going to win this, I needed a plan. A real plan. And I needed allies. I decided to start with the people who had stood on my driveway that day, the ones who looked horrified. Maybe they weren't as loyal to Rick as they seemed. Maybe, just maybe, they were just waiting for someone brave enough to stand up to him. But as I sat there plotting my next move, a pickup truck pulled up to the house. It was Carl, the scrawny compliance officer, and he wasn't alone. 2 uniformed private security guards climbed out of the back, their shirts emblazoned with the Green Valley Ranch Estates logo. They weren't cops. They weren't licensed security. They were just HOA goons. Carl marched up to my porch waving another piece of paper. "This is a notice of pending eviction," he said nervously. "You have 72 hours to vacate the premises." My jaw dropped. Eviction? Before I could respond, one of the guards grabbed a hammer and nailed the notice to the front of my house. It was official now. The HOA wasn't just trying to steal my guns, they were trying to steal my home. And the worst part? They thought they could actually get away with it. I stood there on the porch, watching the dust cloud rise as they drove away, feeling more alone than I had in my entire life. But deep inside, something was awakening. A fire I hadn't felt since the days when Grandpa Tom taught me how to fix a broken fence with nothing but wire and willpower. They had declared war, and they had no idea who they were messing with. The sun dipped low behind the hills as I stared at the eviction notice, the nail still quivering from the force of the hammer. My chest tightened, and for a split second, I thought about giving up. Just packing a bag, walking away from everything Grandpa Tom had left me. But then I remembered the look in Rick Miller's eyes that afternoon. The smugness, the hunger for control. He didn't just want the ranch. He wanted to make an example out of me, to show the whole neighborhood that no one could stand against him. I folded the notice carefully and tucked it into my back pocket. I wasn't running, not now, not ever. First, I needed information. If they were threatening eviction, there had to be paperwork filed with the county. Legal filings, hearings, something. Real eviction wasn't as easy as tacking up a paper and kicking someone off their land, no matter what Rick thought. I grabbed my truck keys and headed straight for town. The county clerk's office closed at 6, and if I hurried, I could just make it. The drive into town was tense. Every bump in the dirt road felt like a drum beat pounding in my ears. When I finally screeched into the county parking lot, I sprinted across the pavement, pushing through the heavy glass doors just as the clerk was flipping the open sign to closed. "Wait!" I called out, breathless. The clerk, a middle-aged woman named Doris who had known my family for years, peered over her glasses. "Mason Walker, what's got you looking like you're being chased by a grizzly?" I slapped the eviction notice onto the counter. "Can you check if there's anything filed against my property? Anything at all?" Doris frowned and tapped away on her ancient computer. After a moment, her eyes widened. "You're not going to believe this," she said, voice low. "There's a pending lien filed by Green Valley Ranch Estates HOA." "A lien?" I repeated, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. She nodded grimly. "It claims you owe over $30,000 in fines for non-compliance with HOA regulations. They filed it 2 weeks ago. They're using it to justify eviction." $30,000? Fines for what? Owning cattle? Having a broken fence post? Breathing? I gritted my teeth. "Can I fight it?" Doris leaned in closer. "It's fishy, Mason. Real fishy. They're claiming jurisdiction based on some cooperation agreement from 1979. But you're not listed under the HOA's original charter boundaries. Not even close." My heart lifted for the first time all day. "So it's bogus?" "It sure looks that way," she said. "But you'll need a good lawyer to untangle it. Fast." I thanked her and bolted back to the truck, my mind racing. I had 72 hours. I needed legal help, and I needed it yesterday. The next morning, after a sleepless night pacing the living room, I drove to the office of Sam Jenkins, an old friend of Grandpa Tom's, and one of the best property lawyers in the county. Sam was a bulldog in a wrinkled suit, with a voice that could shake courtroom walls. He listened quietly as I explained everything: the sudden expansion of the HOA boundaries, the fake fines, the gun seizure, and now the eviction threat. When I finally finished, Sam leaned back in his chair, his mouth pressed into a thin, angry line. "They can't do this, Mason," he said. "Not legally, not even close." "Then why are they getting away with it?" I asked. "Because bullies thrive on fear," Sam said. "They push until someone pushes back." He tapped his desk. "We'll file an emergency injunction to stop the eviction. We'll also sue for illegal seizure of property and civil rights violations." The words sounded good, real good. But deep down, I knew Rick wasn't going to roll over easy. He had his claws deep into the HOA, into the subdivision, maybe even into the local politicians. Sam stood up and clapped me on the back. "Don't worry. We're going to hit them so hard they'll think a tornado rolled through." I left Sam's office feeling lighter. Hope was a powerful thing. But the moment I pulled into my driveway, that hope was nearly crushed. Rick was there, standing on my porch, grinning like he owned the place. Beside him stood Carl and 2 new HOA security guards, bigger, meaner-looking ones, their arms crossed over their chests. Rick stepped forward and said, "We heard you went to the county, Mason. That's cute." I clenched my fists. "Get off my property, Rick." Rick chuckled. "Oh, I'm afraid it's not your property anymore. Not once the eviction finalizes." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, black object. At first I thought it was a weapon. It was worse. It was a padlock. Rick sauntered over to my barn and snapped the padlock onto the doors. Then he waved a piece of paper in the air. "By the authority of the Green Valley Ranch Estates HOA," he said loudly, so the handful of gawking neighbors nearby could hear, "this structure is now sealed pending property forfeiture." I felt like I was going to explode. They had locked up my barn, where my tools, equipment, and the last pieces of my grandfather's legacy were kept. I lunged forward, but one of the guards stepped between us, hand resting on a taser strapped to his belt. Rick leaned in close, his voice low and mocking. "Careful, cowboy. You wouldn't want to add assault to your list of crimes, would you?" I had never wanted to hit a man so badly in my life. But Sam's words echoed in my head. They want you to lose your temper. Don't let them. I stepped back. Rick gave a mocking bow. See you in court, Mr. Walker. And with that, they piled into a convoy of golf carts and pickup trucks and disappeared down the road. I stood there, fists shaking, staring at the locked barn door. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was war. And Rick had just fired the next shot. The metal padlock on my barn gleamed under the sun like a trophy Rick had stolen. I stood there, the weight of the moment pressing down on me like a mountain. My fists ached from clenching so hard, but I forced myself to stay calm. If I lost control now, I'd be playing right into Rick's hands. I needed a plan. A smart one. That evening, I called Sam Jenkins again. After I explained what happened, he didn't even try to hide his anger. They can't seal your property without a legal court order, Mason, he growled, and they sure as hell can't seize your personal belongings. What do we do? I asked, feeling desperate. We file an emergency motion first thing in the morning, Sam said. I'll draft it tonight. Meanwhile, don't touch the lock. Let them hang themselves with their own stupidity. I thanked him and hung up. It wasn't easy, but I followed his advice. I left the barn alone, even though every bone in my body screamed to rip that lock off and throw it at Rick's smug face. Instead, I focused on rallying support. I printed out copies of the so-called cooperation agreement the HOA was using against me. I highlighted every section that proved my ranch was outside the original boundaries. Then I started going door to door around the subdivision. At first, the neighbors were wary. Some closed their doors before I even finished talking. Others shook their heads and muttered about not getting involved. But a few, just a few, listened. Mrs. Langford, an elderly widow who lived alone at the end of Meadowbrook Lane, invited me inside and made me a cup of tea. I never liked that Rick fellow, she said, setting down 2 steaming mugs. Too slick, too bossy. Your grandfather was a good man. Helped my late husband fix our roof once free of charge. I'll help you however I can. By nightfall, I had a small list of people willing to sign affidavits. People who remembered Grandpa Tom. People who didn't trust Rick and his cronies. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The next morning, I met Sam at the courthouse. He filed the emergency motion to stop the eviction and challenge the HOA's lien. We managed to get a temporary restraining order against the HOA, preventing them from taking further action until a full hearing could be held. It was a small victory, but it felt huge. When I got back home, there was a bright orange notice stapled to my fence. Notice of fine, $5,000 for unauthorized assembly. Apparently, the HOA considered me gathering neighbors to talk about my case an illegal assembly that violated their made-up rules. I laughed out loud. The desperation was showing, but my good mood didn't last long. That afternoon, while I was mending a fence line at the edge of my property, I heard the sound of an engine. I looked up and saw a familiar truck rumbling down the dirt road. Rick. He wasn't alone. In the passenger seat sat a man in a sharp suit. Someone I didn't recognize. They parked by my mailbox and got out. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked over. Rick had that oily grin plastered across his face. Mason, meet Mr. Ellis. He's a land developer, very interested in your former ranch. I narrowed my eyes. Former? Rick ignored the comment. Mr. Ellis is prepared to offer you a generous sum to vacate voluntarily, save everyone the hassle. Mr. Ellis extended a hand and smiled thinly. $500,000, cash, close in 30 days. For a split second, the number stunned me. $500,000 could change my life. But then I thought of Grandpa Tom, of the years he spent building this place, of the sunsets we watched together from the porch, of everything this land meant, not just to me, but to my family's legacy. I shook my head slowly. Not for all the money in the world. Mr. Ellis's smile tightened. It's a fair offer. Fair? I barked a humorless laugh. After you tried to steal my guns, lock my barn, slap fake fines on me, and threaten to evict me? Rick's face darkened. "You're making a mistake, Mason." I stepped closer, meeting his glare. "No, Rick, you made the mistake. You thought you could bully a man off his own land." I turned and walked away without another word, leaving them standing in the dust. But deep down, I knew the fight was far from over. That night it got worse. I woke to the sound of tires crunching gravel. Grabbing a flashlight, I crept to the window. 3 trucks idled by the barn. Figures moved in the dark, working quickly. I threw on my boots and charged outside, heart hammering. As I got closer, the flashlight beam caught them. A group of HOA thugs in matching security shirts, crowbars in hand. They were trying to pry the barn doors open. "You better have a death wish," I shouted. The men froze. One of them, the big one who had guarded Rick the day they locked the barn, snarled and stepped forward. "You're trespassing," I bellowed. "Get off my property." Another man raised his crowbar threateningly. And that's when I saw it. Behind them, in the back of one of the trucks, stacked carelessly, were my guns. My stolen guns. They were trying to move them, probably to hide the evidence before the court hearing. Adrenaline flooded my veins. I didn't think. I reacted. I reached for the old bullwhip hanging by the barn entrance, a relic Grandpa Tom had used for cattle herding. With a crack like thunder, I snapped it through the air just inches from the lead thug's hand. He yelped and stumbled back. "You're breaking and entering, theft, destruction of private property," I roared. "Police are on their way." It was a bluff. My phone was still inside the house, but they didn't know that. The men hesitated, exchanged glances, then bolted. I chased them halfway down the driveway, shouting threats and waving the whip like a madman until their taillights disappeared into the night. Panting, heart pounding, I stood alone under the stars, my barn still locked but my spirit burning brighter than ever. They weren't just trying to bankrupt me, they were trying to erase me. But I wasn't going anywhere, and next time they came for me, I was going to be ready. The next morning I barely slept. Every creak in the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside set my nerves on edge. I sat on the porch with a cup of black coffee, watching the sun rise over the hills like it had for generations before me. This land wasn't just dirt and fences. It was my family's blood, sweat, and soul. And I wasn't about to let Rick Miller or anyone else steal it without a fight. First thing after sunrise, I called Sheriff Bradshaw. Sheriff Bradshaw was a mountain of a man, with a thick mustache and a voice like gravel. He had known Grandpa Tom and had a reputation for being fair, but he also hated getting involved in HOA squabbles. Still, I figured it was worth a shot. When Bradshaw picked up, I launched into everything: the gun seizure, the fake fines, the attempted theft the night before. He listened quietly, then sighed. "Mason, you know I don't like HOA business. It's usually civil, not criminal. But stealing your firearms, breaking into your barn, that's serious." I felt a flicker of hope. "So you'll help?" "I'll send a deputy out today," Bradshaw said. "We'll get statements, maybe even press charges if we can." I thanked him and hung up. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. By noon, Deputy Elena Marks showed up at the ranch. She was young, sharp-eyed, and all business. She walked through the property with me, taking pictures of the damaged barn doors, the padlock, and the tire tracks where the HOA thugs had fled. I showed her the stolen guns piled in the back of the truck the night before, though by now they were gone. She nodded thoughtfully as she jotted down notes. "Even if the HOA claims they had some bylaw authority, this is still theft. You can't just take someone's property without a court order." I could have hugged her. "We'll open an investigation," Deputy Marks said, "but be ready. These HOA types usually lawyer up fast." I nodded. I wasn't naive. Rick would fight dirty, but at least now there was an official record, something I could use. Later that afternoon, Sam Jenkins called. "Mason," he said, his voice tight with excitement. "The judge granted the temporary injunction. Effective immediately, the HOA can't fine you, evict you, or touch your property until the full hearing." I felt like a 1,000-pound weight had lifted off my shoulders. Sam continued, and we subpoenaed the HOA's internal records. If they filed any fake liens or fabricated votes, we'll find out. Things were finally swinging in my favor. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe. I spent the next few days reinforcing my fences, double-checking security cameras, and gathering support from the few neighbors willing to stand up. Word spread quickly. People started whispering about Rick's abuses, fines for imaginary violations, threats against homeowners who disagreed with him, misuse of HOA funds. It was like the whole house of cards was teetering, just waiting for a push. Still, Rick wasn't going down without a fight. One evening, just as I was fixing the front gate, a black SUV pulled up. Rick got out, but he wasn't alone. With him was a tall, stocky man in a black suit with a badge clipped to his belt, a federal agent. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked toward them slowly. Rick smiled like a cat who caught a mouse. "Mason Walker, meet Agent Carter. He's with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. We had a little chat about your excessive gun collection." My stomach turned. Agent Carter stepped forward, all serious business. "We received a report about unsecured, unregistered firearms stored improperly on this property. I'm here to conduct an inspection." It was a dirty move. Rick had called in the feds, hoping to bury me under red tape or trumped-up charges. I kept my voice steady. "You have a warrant?" Agent Carter paused, caught off guard. Rick jumped in. "The HOA agreement allows inspections at any time." I cut him off. "Not on private property outside the HOA's jurisdiction, and definitely not without a legal warrant signed by a judge." Agent Carter studied me for a long moment. Finally, he said, "I'll get a warrant. Expect us back." They turned and left without another word. I watched them go, my fists trembling. Rick wasn't just playing dirty now. He was trying to destroy me. I rushed inside and called Sam. After explaining everything, he cursed under his breath. "They're desperate, Mason," he said, "and desperation makes people reckless. We'll be ready." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept the lights off and sat by the window with a loaded revolver, staring into the darkness, waiting. Nothing happened. But deep down, I knew this was the calm before the storm. The next morning, as I was feeding the cattle, my phone buzzed. It was Mrs. Langford. "Mason," she whispered, panic in her voice. "You need to get to the community center, now." "Why?" I asked. "They're holding an emergency HOA meeting. About you. Rick's trying to force a vote to authorize a full property seizure." My blood ran cold. Without even changing out of my muddy boots, I jumped into my truck and tore down the dirt road toward Green Valley Ranch Estates. The community center was packed when I arrived. Neighbors, board members, even a few strangers I didn't recognize. At the front of the room, standing tall and smug, was Rick Miller. He tapped the microphone, his voice booming through the speakers. "We are gathered here today to address an ongoing threat to the safety and harmony of our community. Mason Walker's defiance and lawlessness." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I pushed my way to the front. "You're lying," I shouted. Rick's eyes glittered. "Mr. Walker, this is a closed meeting. You are trespassing." I planted my boots firmly. "This land you're trying to steal? It doesn't belong to the HOA, and you know it." The crowd shifted uneasily. Rick smiled coldly. "Enough talk. Let's vote." He raised a clipboard. "All in favor of authorizing a hostile takeover of Mason Walker's property, say aye." A few hands hesitated, then lifted. But before Rick could claim victory, the back doors burst open. Deputy Marks stormed in, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. She raised a court order high over her head. "Stop this meeting immediately," she barked. Gasps filled the room. Rick's face turned ashen. Deputy Marks marched to the front and slammed the paper onto the podium. "This is a cease and desist order, signed by Judge Harris. Any further action against Mason Walker will be considered harassment, property theft, and conspiracy." The room erupted in chaos. Shouts, arguments, people abandoning their seats. Rick stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I stood tall, meeting his stunned gaze. For once, Rick Miller had nothing to say. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. He wouldn't give up that easily. And the worst was still to come. The moment Deputy Marks shut down the meeting, it was like someone had kicked a hornet's nest inside the community center. People were shouting over one another, some trying to defend Rick, others demanding to know how deep the corruption went. The noise was deafening. Rick tried to slip out the side door unnoticed, but I caught his movement. I stepped right into his path, blocking him. "You're done, Rick," I said, my voice low but sharp. "The sheriff's involved. The court's involved. You're not going to bully your way out of this." For the first time since this whole nightmare began, Rick looked nervous. His hands twitched at his sides. His face, usually so smug, was twisted with frustration and fear. But still, he forced a grin. "You think this changes anything, Mason? You're still a problem. Problems get dealt with." He shoved past me, knocking my shoulder hard as he stormed outside into the blinding sunlight. I stood there a moment longer, breathing hard. Every fiber of my being wanted to chase after him, to demand answers, to put an end to this once and for all. But I knew better now. Patience would win this war, not rage. Deputy Marks approached, tucking the court order back into her folder. "You did good holding your ground," she said. "We'll be keeping a closer eye on the situation now. And I've already pulled body cam footage from the incident at your ranch. It's not looking good for Rick." That small reassurance kept me from unraveling completely. I headed back to my ranch, the long drive giving me time to think. Everything Rick had thrown at me, the fake fines, the gun theft, the illegal eviction, the padlocked barn, it was all falling apart, piece by piece. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming. And I was right. That night, around 11 p.m., I heard a low rumble outside. I grabbed my flashlight and cautiously stepped onto the porch. Two black SUVs, their headlights off, crept up the driveway like sharks in the dark water. A chill ran down my spine. Before I could react, the SUVs stopped near the barn. Doors flew open, and a group of masked men jumped out, armed with crowbars and bolt cutters. They were going after the barn again. But this time, they weren't being sneaky about it. I ran inside and grabbed my phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. "Emergency," the operator answered. "This is Mason Walker at Green Valley Ranch," I shouted. "I'm under attack. They're trying to break into my barn again." "Units are on the way," she assured me, but I knew it would take at least 15 minutes for the nearest deputies to get there. I couldn't just stand there and watch them destroy everything. I sprinted back outside and flipped the switch on the old floodlights Grandpa Tom had installed years ago. Suddenly, the whole front yard lit up like a football stadium. The masked men froze like deer in headlights. I didn't hesitate. I marched forward, bullwhip in hand, heart pounding like a drum. "You're trespassing on private property," I bellowed. "Get off my land." One of the men, a burly guy in a hoodie, pointed a crowbar at me. "You don't want to do this, old man," he snarled. I cracked the whip, the sound splitting the night like a gunshot. They flinched. And then, to my shock, Rick himself stepped out from behind one of the SUVs. Unmasked, smirking. "You're outnumbered, Mason," he said calmly. "Walk away and we'll forget this happened." "You're insane," I spat. "You think the law's not going to touch you?" Rick shrugged. "By the time they get here, we'll be long gone. And you'll be left with nothing but ashes." I realized then, they weren't just trying to steal or harass anymore. They were planning to burn down my barn, destroy evidence, destroy my livelihood, maybe even destroy my home. I gripped the whip tighter. My brain raced. I needed to stall them just a few more minutes. "You'll never get away with this," I said, stepping forward slowly, forcing them to focus on me and not the barn. Rick laughed. "Who's gonna stop me? You?" I smiled grimly. "No." And right on cue, the sound of distant sirens cut through the night. Rick's face twisted in rage. "Scatter!" he screamed at his men. They bolted for the SUVs. One peeled out immediately, tires screeching on the gravel. The second SUV, the one Rick was headed toward, stalled. Deputy Marks's cruiser came roaring down the driveway, lights flashing, siren blaring. Rick hesitated, looked back at me, and then made a desperate break for the tree line on foot. I wasn't about to let him get away. I charged after him, adrenaline giving me wings. He was fast, but he didn't know the land like I did. I cut through the brush, circled wide, and intercepted him by the old cattle gate. Rick skidded to a stop, chest heaving. "You're done," I said, panting. He lunged at me, but I was ready. I sidestepped, stuck my boot out, and tripped him flat onto his face. By the time Rick rolled over, Deputy Marks was there, handcuffing him roughly as he sputtered and cursed. "You're under arrest," she said, reading him his rights, "for trespassing, attempted arson, destruction of private property, and theft." Rick glared up at me with pure hatred burning in his eyes. "This isn't over, Walker," he snarled. I leaned down close so only he could hear. "It is for you," I whispered. They hauled him to his feet and shoved him into the back of the cruiser. As the flashing lights disappeared down the road, I stood there in the moonlight, my chest heaving with exhaustion and relief. It was over. Or at least, it would be soon. There was still the court case to settle. Still the matter of getting my stolen guns back. Still the slow process of cleaning up the mess Rick had made of the community. But for the first time in a long while, I knew one thing for sure. They picked the wrong man to mess with. And I wasn't going anywhere. The morning of the court hearing dawned cool and bright, but I barely noticed the good weather. I was already dressed in my best jeans, a clean button-down shirt, and the old leather boots Grandpa Tom used to call his Sunday boots. I wanted to walk into that courthouse not just as Mason Walker the rancher, but as the man fighting to protect his family's legacy. Sam Jenkins met me on the courthouse steps. He looked sharp in a navy suit, clutching a battered leather briefcase stuffed with paperwork. "You ready for this?" he asked. I nodded, though my stomach churned like a storm was brewing inside. The courtroom was packed. Neighbors from Green Valley Ranch Estates filled the benches, whispering among themselves. Some shot me supportive glances. Others avoided my eyes. At the defense table sat Rick Miller, looking far less smug than usual. His expensive suit couldn't hide the dark circles under his eyes or the tension in his clenched jaw. Sitting beside him was a high-priced attorney from the city, flipping through papers like he couldn't believe he'd gotten stuck handling an HOA mess in the middle of nowhere. Judge Harris entered, an older woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She didn't even sit before barking, "Let's get this circus started." Sam rose first. He laid it all out. The illegal gun seizure, the bogus fines, the false eviction attempt, the attempted theft and arson, and the fabricated HOA boundary expansion. He submitted the original property maps showing my ranch clearly outside HOA jurisdiction. He even handed over copies of the old cooperation agreement that Rick had twisted into something it was never meant to be. Sam ended by holding up a photo, a snapshot from Deputy Mark's body cam footage the night Rick and his goons tried to burn my barn down. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sam said, turning to face the packed courtroom, "this isn't about HOA rules. This isn't about community safety. This is about greed, about one man's desperate attempt to steal something that was never his." He sat down to a ripple of murmurs from the audience. Rick's lawyer stood, adjusting his tie. He tried to spin a story about community safety and property values and keeping dangerous elements out of the neighborhood. Judge Harris wasn't buying it. "Mr. Miller," she said coldly, cutting off the lawyer mid-sentence, "did you or did you not personally order the seizure of Mr. Walker's firearms without a court order?" Rick squirmed. "I acted in the best interests of the community." "That's a yes or no question," she snapped. Rick swallowed hard. "Yes." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Judge Harris scribbled something on her notepad, her lips pressed into a thin, furious line. And did you attempt to forcibly evict Mr. Walker based on a lien with no legal basis? She asked. Rick opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded stiffly. And did you attempt to forcibly break into Mr. Walker's barn without a warrant or court order? Rick said nothing, but his lawyer answered for him. My client asserts. I'm not asking your client to assert anything, Judge Harris snapped. This is not a debate. This is me getting the facts straight before I decide how hard to come down on him. The courtroom was dead silent. Rick's face turned a deeper shade of red with every passing second. Judge Harris finally set down her pen and looked up, her gaze like a hammer. I find that the Green Valley Ranch Estates HOA, under Mr. Rick Miller's leadership, engaged in illegal harassment, property theft, civil rights violations, and abuse of process. I hereby void all claims the HOA has made against Mr. Walker's property. A burst of applause erupted from the benches, but she wasn't done. In addition, she said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade, I am referring this case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Mr. Miller, you are hereby remanded into custody pending formal charges. Rick's jaw dropped. Before he could even protest, 2 deputies flanked him and slapped handcuffs on his wrists. The courtroom exploded, some people cheering, others shouting in disbelief. Rick's lawyer looked like he wanted to sink into the floor and disappear. Sam clapped me on the back, grinning wide. You did it, Mason, he said. No, I said, watching as they hauled Rick away. We did it. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and microphones. Mr. Walker, how do you feel about the verdict? What are you going to do now? I shielded my eyes from the sun and said simply, I'm going home, back to my ranch, right where I belong. And I meant it. But just as I climbed into my truck, Mrs. Langford appeared, shuffling over with her cane. We're proud of you, she said warmly. You reminded all of us what standing up really looks like. I nodded, feeling a lump rise in my throat. Thank you, ma'am. As I drove back down the dusty road to the ranch, everything looked different, brighter, stronger. Like the land itself was proud of me. The barn still needed repairs, the fields still needed tending, the cattle still needed feeding. But my home was mine. My family's legacy was safe. And no HOA president, no matter how greedy or powerful, could ever take that away from me again, or from anyone else willing to stand and fight. Still, something inside me knew. I couldn't just go back to the way things were before. Rick's corruption had hurt a lot of people, not just me. Maybe it was time someone cleaned up the HOA for good. Maybe it was time to turn the tables completely. Maybe, just maybe, it was time for me to run for HOA president. The idea kept gnawing at me like a dog with a bone. Run for HOA president. It sounded crazy at first. After everything they'd done to me, why would I want to be part of that mess? But as I sat on the porch that evening, looking over the fields Grandpa Tom had once tended with his bare hands, I realized it wasn't about power. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about making sure no one else went through what I had. If I didn't step up, someone just as bad as Rick could fill the vacuum he left behind. The same corruption, the same bullying all over again, maybe worse next time. I picked up the phone and called Sam Jenkins. Sam, I said, how hard is it to get on the ballot for HOA president? He chuckled. Easier than you think, Mason. All you need is a nomination and a handful of signatures. And after what just happened, I'd bet half the neighborhood would carry you into office on their shoulders. That gave me the boost I needed. The next morning I made it official. I submitted my nomination papers and spent the next week going door to door, not just to campaign, but to listen. People had stories. So many stories. Mrs. Langford's fines for her garden gnomes. The Ramirez family fined for having too many guests at their son's birthday party. An elderly veteran 2 streets over fined for flying his American flag too high on the pole. It wasn't just me. Rick's HOA reign had terrorized the whole neighborhood. And now, people were ready for change. The day of the special election, the community center was packed again. But this time the mood was electric, buzzing with hope instead of fear. I stood at the front, wearing my Sunday boots again, but no fancy suit. Just jeans, a clean shirt, and the same determination that had carried me through every fight so far. When my name was called, I stepped up to the microphone. I didn't give a long speech. I didn't need to. I simply said, "This land taught me that real leadership isn't about power. It's about service. It's about protecting people, not controlling them. If you trust me with this job, I'll make sure your voices are heard. All of them." That was it. When the votes were counted an hour later, the results were overwhelming. I won. By a landslide. People cheered, clapped, even cried. I shook hands until my arm nearly fell off, but I wasn't celebrating for long. The very next morning, I got to work. First, I called an emergency board meeting and introduced new rules. No fines without a full board vote and homeowner appeal. No property inspections without homeowner consent. No weapon bans that violated constitutional rights. Full transparency of all HOA finances. And most importantly, a full independent audit of Rick Miller's time in office. The board approved every motion unanimously. Cleaning up the mess Rick left behind wasn't going to happen overnight. But it was happening. For real this time. A week later, the sheriff's office confirmed the criminal charges against Rick: fraud, theft, attempted arson, civil rights violations. He was looking at serious jail time. Meanwhile, the judge ordered all my stolen firearms returned to me, every single one, even the Civil War musket Grandpa Tom had prized so much. I built a special display case inside the house for that musket. It was a reminder, a symbol, not just of the fight I had won, but of the spirit Grandpa Tom had passed down to me. The spirit of standing your ground when everything's against you. One evening, after a long day of rebuilding fences and clearing brush, I sat on the porch again, sipping coffee as the sunset painted the sky in gold and purple. Mrs. Langford walked up the drive, carrying a fresh-baked pie. "I figured the new president could use a break," she teased. I chuckled and took the pie, setting it carefully on the table. We sat there for a while, watching the cattle graze, the barn standing proud against the horizon, the field stretching out as far as the eye could see. "This place," she said softly. "It feels different now. Safer." I nodded. "It's not just the land. It's the people. You protect each other. You build something real." She smiled warmly. "Your grandfather would be proud." I smiled back, feeling a tightness in my chest I hadn't realized was there. "Thank you," I said. Later that night, as the stars came out one by one, I walked down to the barn. I unlocked the doors, and no more padlocks from thugs, no more fear. Inside, everything was where it belonged. Tools neatly hung, saddles polished, Grandpa Tom's old rocking chair in the corner. I sat down in that chair, feeling its familiar creak beneath me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't have to look over my shoulder. The ranch was safe. My rights were safe. The community was healing. And as the cool night breeze drifted through the open barn doors, I knew one thing for certain. No matter who tried to take it away, this ranch, this life, would always be worth fighting for. Because some things are too important to ever back down from. And sometimes the strongest walls aren't built with bricks or wood. They're built with heart.
Bang! The gunshot echoed through the cold morning air, sharp and deafening like thunder crashing right above your head. I froze, my chest pounding so hard I could hear it thumping in my ears. My eyes locked on her, Karen. She stumbled back, hands raised, a look of total shock on her face. Blood started to bloom on her shoulder like red ink on paper. "Call 911, I shouted as I ran toward the gate. My wife, Ashley, was already on it, screaming into her phone. "Someone's been shot. She was trespassing. Oh my God!" Karen had been trying to climb over the fence. Again. She was gripping a sack of stolen goods, eggs, some tools, maybe a few vegetables, whatever she could grab before the shot rang out. The bullet wasn't meant to hit her. The warning shot went wild. Or maybe not. I don't know. And as she sat there, slumped against the wooden post, bleeding but alive, I looked down at her and thought, how did it come to this? How does a woman, a self-declared protector of community aesthetics, end up stealing from my farm and getting herself shot? And just like that, the sirens began to scream in the distance. But before we get there, let me take you back. Because this didn't start with a gunshot. It started with a dream about peace, simplicity, and tomatoes. 6 months earlier, Ashley and I had finally done it. We left the suburbs, sold the house, packed up our stuff, and moved out to a quiet patch of land we bought just outside of a small town in Texas. It wasn't huge, about 12 acres, but to us it was heaven. No more honking cars, no more nosy neighbors peeking through curtains, no more HOAs, or so we thought. We built our dream home with our own hands. Took 6 months. Raised chickens. Started planting tomatoes, kale, zucchini, even tried strawberries. Texas sun is brutal, so that didn't go great. I fixed up an old red barn out back. It was hard work, yeah, but it felt like something real, something ours. Then the emails started coming. To the owner of 1501 Elder Ridge Lane, the first one began. It has come to our attention that you are in violation of community standard codes. Community standard codes? We weren't in the neighborhood anymore. That was the whole point. Turns out, the HOA of the neighborhood next to our land claimed they had visual authority over our property because they could see our barn from their fancy cul-de-sac. And at the head of it all, Karen, middle-aged, short brown hair, ironed polos, and an attitude like she owned the zip code. She was the president of the HOA and treated her role like she was the mayor of a country club. She marched onto our land the first week we moved in. No knocking, no hello, just waltzed in like she was coming to inspect her garden. "You'll need to paint this barn," she said, tapping it with her clipboard. "It's rust red. We only allow forest green or white within visible sightlines of our community." I was so shocked I didn't even speak. Ashley stepped in. "Excuse me, ma'am, but this is private property. We're not under your HOA." Karen sniffed. "If it affects our property values, it's our business." And from that day on, it was war. She called animal control on our chickens. Claimed the rooster crowing was emotional terrorism. She sent compliance letters with photos she must have taken from behind the trees on the edge of her neighborhood. We ignored her. First. Then she escalated. One morning I woke up to find our barn had been tagged with white paint. Eyesore in giant letters. We didn't have cameras up back then. No evidence. No proof. But we knew. She started sneaking in when we weren't home. Things would go missing. Just small stuff, a bucket, a garden trowel, a handful of eggs. Ashley said I was being paranoid. Until one night, she caught Karen on her phone camera, standing under the moonlight, digging around in our chicken coop like some kind of crazed raccoon. We went to the police. They told us the footage wasn't clear enough to press charges, but they'd talk to her. Nothing happened, so I installed cameras, motion sensors, even put up "No trespassing" signs all over the property line. Still, she came back. One morning, our tomatoes were all gone, just vanished. I found a single footprint by the garden bed. Ashley started sleeping with the lights on. I started sleeping with the shotgun under the bed. And then it happened. That morning started out calm. The sun was rising gold and soft. I made coffee. Ashley was collecting eggs. And then the alarm went off. Motion sensor at the barn. I rushed out. There she was, Karen, climbing over the fence with a sack full of stuff. She saw me and ran. I yelled, "Get off my property." She didn't stop. She reached into her jacket for something. Maybe her phone, maybe pepper spray, maybe something else. And I fired. Just a warning shot. But she stumbled. She fell. And blood started to soak her sleeve. I stood there frozen, the gun still warm in my hands. Ashley screamed. And I knew everything was about to change. But I didn't know just how bad it would get. Because Karen wasn't just trespassing. She was hiding something. Something way darker than stolen eggs and HOA fines. And that shot was only the beginning. The ambulance came fast. Too fast. Like they were already on their way. Karen sat slumped by the fence post, clutching her shoulder, her face pale, lips trembling, but her eyes weren't scared. They were furious. "I want him arrested," she whispered through gritted teeth as the paramedics lifted her onto the gurney. "He tried to kill me." I tried to speak, but the deputy sheriff held out his hand. "Sir, we need you to step back." Ashley was crying. "It was an accident. He didn't mean to shoot her. She was trespassing. Look at the signs. She's been harassing us for months." The deputy didn't say much, just looked around slowly, taking it all in. The sack Karen dropped, the fence, the camera mounted near the barn, still blinking. "You got that on footage?" he asked me. I nodded. "Yeah, everything. Every single second." But even as I said it, I had this cold feeling in my chest. Because if the camera didn't catch what actually happened, if she played the victim well enough, I could lose everything. She was loaded into the back of the ambulance. The sirens wailed again, this time pulling away. The deputy turned to me. "For now, you're not under arrest. But we'll need a statement, and we'll need to take your firearm into evidence." I handed over the shotgun, trying to keep my hands from shaking. Ashley wrapped her arm around me. "It's going to be okay," she whispered. I wasn't so sure. That night was the first time I didn't sleep on our land since we moved in. They took us to the station for statements, and we didn't get back until past midnight. The stars were out when we returned, cold and bright like a sky full of watching eyes. The barn door was swinging. That was weird. I know I closed it. I always closed it. I walked up with the flashlight, heart thudding. There was nothing inside, just the sound of wind creaking through the wood. But in the corner, where I kept our old feed sacks, there was something strange. A hole, dug under the floorboards. Not deep, but like someone had been stashing something there. I bent down, brushing aside the dirt. Nothing, just the imprint of a square object. And something else. A smell. Oil. Gasoline, maybe. That's when it hit me. Karen wasn't just stealing eggs. She was looking for something, or hiding something. And whatever it was, she didn't want us to find it. 2 weeks passed. No charges. No visits. Just silence. Karen was recovering. We heard through the grapevine she was milking it. Telling her HOA buddies she'd been hunted like an animal by the wild man in the woods. We didn't leave the property much. Felt like everyone in town knew what happened. But strangely, nobody came. No cops. No reporters. Not even Karen. Until one morning we got a letter. Official, sealed. Delivered by courier. I opened it slowly, hands stiff. It was from the HOA's attorney. They were suing us. Civil trespass liability, emotional distress, intent to cause harm, endangerment of community welfare. $350,000. Ashley sat down hard on the porch bench. "This is a joke, right? This is a joke." I stared at the letter. No punchline. "She's trying to ruin us," I said. "Why?" Ashley whispered. "Why not just leave us alone?" And right then we heard something. A snap of a twig. Behind the house. I grabbed the flashlight, my pulse jumping again. I swept it across the back field. Something moved. Just beyond the trees. 2 figures. Not 1. 2. I couldn't make them out. But they were walking away fast, slipping behind the trees like ghosts. And lying in the grass where they'd been standing. A trail of eggs. Cracked. Every single one. Ashley screamed. I ran toward the fence, flashlight beam bouncing. Too late. They were gone. But they'd left something behind. A note, taped to the back of our chicken coop. Sloppy handwriting. Big red letters. "Next time, it won't just be eggs." We didn't sleep that night. Ashley kept asking, "Do you think it was Karen?" I didn't answer, because I didn't think it was just her anymore. Someone else was involved. Someone who didn't care about fences, cameras, or court orders. The next day, I dug deeper into that hole in the barn. Literally, tore up the floorboards, and found something. An old plastic case, hidden in the dirt. Inside, blueprints, maps, and a memory card. And that's when the power went out. Just like that, all the lights in the house, the barn, gone. Ashley screamed from the kitchen. I ran inside. She pointed to the window. There, standing just beyond the edge of our driveway, was a man in a hoodie, watching, not moving, just watching. And then he turned and disappeared into the trees. I called the sheriff. They said they'd send someone by in the morning. Morning? I didn't wait. I loaded up our backup generator, got power running again, and started copying the memory card to my laptop. Ashley sat beside me, eyes wide. What do you think is on it? I don't know, I said. But someone didn't want us to find it. The screen flickered, files loaded, and then one by one, I opened them. Blueprints of our land, underground routes, access points, markings near the creek bed, and videos, drone footage, zooming in on our barn, our garden, our bedroom window. Someone had been watching us for months. Before the barn, before the eggs, before the shot. Ashley covered her mouth. What is this? I stared at the screen, and I realized this wasn't about stolen eggs. It wasn't even about Karen. She was just the beginning. The gunshot had started a war, but we hadn't seen the real enemy yet, and they were already inside the fence. The next morning, I didn't wait for the sheriff. I packed the case, the memory card, everything into the back of my truck and drove straight into town. Ashley didn't want me going alone, but I told her to stay back and lock every door. Keep the shotgun close. When I reached the station, I asked for Deputy Morales, the only one who'd seemed halfway interested when Karen got shot. He was mid-30s, solid build, sharp eyes that didn't miss much. He'd grown up around here, said his dad used to fish by the same creek that cut through our land. I handed him the case. What's this? He asked, flipping it open. Something's wrong, I said. This isn't just about a trespassing HOA lady with a god complex. Someone else is involved. He raised an eyebrow but stayed quiet, slid the memory card into his computer. And then I saw it, the same reaction I had when I first looked at the files. Blueprints, surveillance logs, time-stamped notes, private coordinates. What the hell? Morales muttered. These look like smuggling tunnels? He leaned in closer. This marking here, that's the county gas line. Who the hell marked that? I don't know, I said. But this was buried under my barn. Karen's been sneaking onto my land for months. I think she was either hiding this or looking for it. He exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. This could be serious, like federal-level serious. Then why haven't they done anything? I asked. She got shot, Morales. That was 2 weeks ago. No charges, no press, no follow-up. It's like they're pretending it never happened. He stared at the screen a moment longer, then nodded slowly. Let me make a few calls. Go home, but keep that place locked down. You hear me? I left the station with more questions than answers, but I had a feeling Morales knew more than he was letting on. His face had gone pale when he saw those files, like he'd recognized something he wasn't supposed to. Back at the house, Ashley was on edge. You were gone too long, she said the second I stepped through the door. Had to talk to Morales, I replied. He's looking into it. She nodded, biting her lip. While you were gone, someone left this. She handed me an envelope. No name, no stamp, just a scrap of torn brown paper inside. It read, "You're in over your head. Leave before it's too late." I felt my stomach turn to stone. Ashley was shaking now. I'm scared. This isn't just Karen anymore. This is bigger. I don't know what's going on, but it's not safe. I pulled her close. We'll be okay. I promise. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. The next 2 days were quiet. Too quiet. No motion alarms. No trespassers. No Karen. Then the barn burned down. It happened around 3 a.m. We woke up to the sound of popping wood and the glow of orange fire lighting up our bedroom ceiling. I bolted out of bed, Ashley right behind me. We ran outside in our pajamas, barefoot on the gravel. The barn was already swallowed by flames. I grabbed the hose, uselessly spraying the sides, coughing in the smoke. Ashley screamed, The chickens! But it was too late. The fire moved too fast. Like it had been fed something. Gasoline. I stood there, helpless, tears in my eyes as the roof caved in. The barn I'd spent months rebuilding, our tools, our feed, our solar battery backups. All of it gone. When the fire finally died out, I dropped to my knees in the ash. And in the rubble, half buried under a charred beam, I saw something that didn't belong. A phone. Burnt, but not all the way through. I picked it up, and just before the screen fizzled out, a name flashed. Karen. I didn't know if it was her phone, or if someone wanted us to think it was. Morales came out the next morning to inspect the scene. He was tense, sweating, barely said a word while he walked the perimeter. Someone did this on purpose, I said, pointing to the gas line running under the property. They wanted to destroy that barn. I know, he muttered. I believe you. He kicked at the scorched dirt, then leaned close. There's something I didn't tell you, he said. That memory card you brought in? We found prints on it. They matched a guy named Colin Riggs. He used to work for a pipeline company that got shut down a few years back for illegal drilling. What's he got to do with me? I asked. Riggs disappeared a year ago. Feds think he was operating off-grid, using old maps, stealing fuel or water from rural lines. Your barn, your land, might have been one of his sites. Ashley stepped forward. You think Karen was working with him? Morales paused. I don't know yet, but I think she knew something. Maybe she found the stash. Maybe she tried to blackmail him. Or maybe she was trying to keep you from finding it first. Ashley's voice cracked. But why the lawsuit? Why go through all of that trouble? Because when you dig up someone's secrets, Morales said grimly, you don't just make enemies. You make scared enemies. And that's when his radio crackled. Unit 3, we've got a 10 to 55. Abandoned vehicle. Plates match suspect Colin Riggs. Location, East Ridge Creek. Morales and I locked eyes. That creek ran right through my property. He clicked his radio. This is Morales. I'm 5 minutes out. Then he looked at me. You coming? I didn't hesitate. Ashley grabbed my arm. Be careful. I nodded. And then we drove. The trail to East Ridge Creek was narrow. Trees hung low. The kind of path where cell service dies, and all you can hear are your own thoughts. When we reached the clearing, there it was. A rusted black pickup with the hood popped open. And lying next to it, a body, face down. Still, Morales drew his weapon. I followed close behind. He flipped the body over with his boot. It wasn't Riggs. It was someone else. Mid-20s. Dirty clothes. Greasy hands. But on his wrist a tag. HOA maintenance crew. Morales looked at me. This is getting out of control. And just then, a gunshot rang out. We dropped flat behind the truck. Another shot whizzed past. Closer this time. Someone was out there. Watching. Waiting. I looked at Morales. He's still here. And we weren't alone anymore. The gunshot echoed again. Closer this time. Cracking through the trees like a whip. Morales yanked me behind the truck. Eyes darting toward the tree line. Stay down, he hissed. I didn't argue. Leaves rustled hard about 30 yards out. Someone was running. Morales peered over the hood. Gun steady. Then gave me a look I won't forget. Back me up, he said. But don't be a hero. He darted left, weaving low between bushes. I followed to the right, heart hammering so hard I could barely hear the crunch of my boots over the dry brush. The trees swallowed us fast. I couldn't see Morales anymore, but I could hear him. Drop it. Hands where I can see em. Then a thud. A grunt. A crash of branches. I sprinted toward the noise, lungs burning, flashlight bobbing wildly as I ran. That's when I saw them. Morales and a man, locked in a struggle near the creek's edge. The guy was wild-eyed, long hair, covered in mud and grease like he hadn't seen a shower in weeks. Riggs. He shoved Morales hard and made a break for it, sprinting across the shallows. I raised the flashlight and yelled, "Stop!" But he didn't. He turned, pulled something from his waistband, a pistol. I dove behind a tree as he fired. Bark exploded above my head. Morales returned fire. 2 quick shots. Riggs went down hard into the water. Silence. Just the sound of the creek gurgling past his floating body. Morales rushed in, kicked the gun away, and checked his pulse. Still alive, he muttered. Barely. He looked at me. Call it in. He's the one. He knows everything. 2 hours later, the whole creek was swarming with law enforcement. Locals, feds, men in black windbreakers who didn't say much but took over everything. They took Riggs away on a stretcher, cuffed to the rails. Still unconscious. One of the agents, a tall woman with silver hair and no-nonsense eyes, came over to where I stood. Your name? She asked. Jack. Jack Dalton. You were the one who found the memory card. I nodded. She looked out toward the trees, then back at me. You have any idea what you just stepped into? Not really, I admitted. Good, she said without smiling. Keep it that way. She handed me a card. No name, just a number. Call this if you see anything else strange. And Mr. Dalton, she paused. Don't go digging any deeper. It's not just eggs and garden tools anymore. With that, she turned and walked off, disappearing into the huddle of agents and vehicles. By the time I got back to the house, the sky was starting to bleed orange again. Ashley was waiting on the porch, still in her robe, shotgun resting across her lap. I told her everything. Riggs, the body, the feds. She listened quietly, eyes wide and unblinking. Then, at the end of it, she said, What about Karen? I stared out at the road. She's involved somehow. Either she knew what Riggs was doing, or she found it after he left. Ashley leaned forward. What if she was trying to stop him? What if the trespassing, the eggs, the lawsuit, it was all just her way of warning us off? I shook my head. She had a gun pulled on us last year. She's not innocent. But maybe she's not the worst one, Ashley whispered. That stuck with me. The next day, we got another letter. This time, slid under the gate. No envelope. Just a piece of white paper folded neat. You should have left. It's not over. Ashley's hand trembled as she read it. They're still out there, she said. Someone else. I took the letter and burned it. We're not going anywhere, I told her. This is our home. They want us scared? Too bad. 3 nights later, the chickens started screaming. It was past midnight. No wind. No coyotes. Just this sudden, horrible sound. Shrieking, flapping, slamming. Ashley and I burst out the front door, weapons ready. We sprinted to the coop, flashlights slicing through the darkness, and froze. The coop gate was wide open, feathers everywhere, one hen flopping on the ground, injured but alive, and spray painted across the side of the coop, in jagged, angry letters. Blood for blood, Ashley gasped. What does that mean? I didn't answer, because I was already looking past the coop, into the woods, where a shape was standing, still, watching, not Karen, not Riggs, someone else. Then it turned, and vanished. The next morning, Morales came back, looking like he hadn't slept in days. We traced Riggs' phone, he said. You know who he was calling the night before the barn burned down? Who? I asked. Karen, he said. Ashley blinked. She was involved? Morales nodded. But here's the twist. The number he called wasn't her personal phone. It was a burner, traced back to a P.O. box rented under a fake name in your town. Someone local. Someone connected. My mouth went dry. What are you saying? I asked. I'm saying Karen might have been in over her head. She could have been blackmailed into helping Riggs. Or worse, she might have been trying to stop him. Ashley stared at us both. Then who was behind it all? Morales hesitated. We don't know. Not yet. But whoever it is, they've been using your land for years. Then his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, froze, and then said quietly, Karen's gone missing. That night I couldn't sleep. Neither could Ashley. We sat on the porch, staring out at the trees. The wind was back, whispering through the branches like voices in the dark. Then my phone buzzed. No number. Just one message. A photo. Karen. Bound. Blindfolded. Sitting in what looked like a storm cellar. And the words. You want answers? Come get them. Coordinates followed. I showed Ashley. Her face went pale. Jack, she whispered. That's under our property. And then we heard it. Faint knocking. Coming from the fields. From underground. The knocking was slow. Steady. Like someone was tapping on the underside of our land with metal knuckles. Ashley grabbed my arm. Her voice barely more than a whisper. You heard that, right? I nodded, listening hard. Knock. 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 It was coming from the far edge of the tomato beds, near the line where the grass met the woods. Right where that old rusted water pump sat, the one we thought didn't work. I grabbed the flashlight and the shotgun, handed Ashley my phone. Call Morales. Tell him to get here now. And whatever happens, don't come down after me. Her eyes filled with tears. Jack! But I kissed her forehead and ran into the dark. The soil around the pump was soft. Softer than I remembered. Like it had been disturbed recently. The knocking had stopped. I circled the pump and spotted something I'd never noticed before. A handle, half buried in the dirt. I dug around it with my bare hands. My fingers hit cold steel. A trapdoor, hidden beneath a layer of sod and grass. I braced myself, lifted. It creaked open, revealing a narrow tunnel of concrete and dirt, with metal rungs leading straight down. Pitch black, and something else. That smell. Gasoline, sweat, damp earth. I took a deep breath and climbed in. The tunnel dropped about 20 feet, then leveled off into a cramped corridor just wide enough for me to crouch walk. The walls were lined with old boards and pipes, wrapped in duct tape and wiring. The air was stale and heavy, filled with the kind of silence that presses in on your ears. As I moved deeper, I started seeing things. Crates stacked high, some open, filled with electronics, batteries, even radios. Then I reached a room, carved right into the earth. There were maps on the walls, satellite photos, diagrams of our property, and in the center a chair. Karen sat there, blindfolded, tied at the wrists and ankles. Alive, barely. I rushed to her, tore the blindfold off. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, lips cracked. She blinked, gasped. Jack? She whispered. You have to go. Now. But I didn't move. Who did this to you? Who's behind all this? I asked. She started to cry. You don't understand. It's not just me. They've been using your land for years. Underground storage, smuggling routes, power siphoning. I tried to stop it. I tried to make you leave. I thought if I scared you off, they'd leave me alone. Who? I demanded. Who are they? Karen's lips trembled. He used to be on the HOA board. He's not anymore. He got bought out. Money. Lots of it. He said if I didn't help, he'd. And that's when the lights flickered. A hum buzzed through the tunnel walls. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not one pair. Multiple. Coming from the other side of the tunnel. Karen's eyes went wide. He's coming, she gasped. He knows you're here. I cut her ropes quickly. She was weak, but I hoisted her up onto my shoulder and ran back through the narrow corridor. But halfway up the metal ladder, I heard the sound that made my blood run cold. The trapdoor slamming shut. Locked. From the outside. I kicked it. Slammed my shoulder into it. It wouldn't budge. Karen was wheezing, barely holding on. Then I remembered my phone. Gone. I'd left it with Ashley. But Karen had something on her. A tiny old flip phone, duct taped to her ankle. Probably planted there as a last cruel joke. Still had battery. No signal. But a number saved. I hit it. It rang once. Twice. Then someone answered. I didn't speak. But I heard him. Low, calm, smooth like a snake. Well, the voice said. Didn't think you'd get that far. I froze. Karen was crying. Please, let us go. No, the man said. You broke the rules. Now you pay. That land was meant to stay forgotten. Buried. And you brought light to it. Then the line went dead. The lights flickered again. and smoke started to fill the tunnel. Not fire, gas. They were trying to finish the job. Back at the house, Ashley was on the porch, phone in hand, screaming into the line. "You don't understand. They're in the ground. Jack went down there. He hasn't come back. You have to hurry." But as she spoke, she heard something. A soft, electronic beep. From the woods, she stepped off the porch, her feet crunching over something. Wires, running through the grass, leading to a small metal box nestled under the bushes, with a red light, flashing, and a timer. 00:23, 00:22. She backed away slowly, heart in her throat. Then she screamed, "Get out of there!" Underground, I could smell it now. The timer was real. Karen collapsed to the ground. "We're going to die," she sobbed. I grabbed a metal rod and slammed it into the hatch over and over. Nothing. Then I saw it. A crack in the wall. Just big enough. I threw my shoulder into it. Once. Twice. It gave way. The dirt crumbled. A second tunnel